Well, in practice, actually, we're going to move very seamlessly from Andrew's talk to mine, and we hadn't planned this at all, but I owe a great debt to Andrew, and I'm going to be saying frequently, as Andrew said earlier, because he set up very nicely what I wanted to talk about today. And so when Dagmar first approached me and emailed me about this conference, she asked me a question which I found very difficult to answer, and that question was, she had done some research that indicated that much of the trade in mercury in Asia in the 16th and 17th centuries, or even earlier actually, the 15th and 16th centuries, was largely in the hands of Portuguese traders. And she asked me if I knew anything about that. Here's the traditional apothecary symbol for mercury. It's not from a Portuguese text, but I just thought I'd start with that because it's kind of nice. And I told her that I didn't know much about that trade because in the documentation that I look at, even in the early stuff, the 16th century stuff, where you get lists of drugs that are being traded, yes, there are some mercurial compounds and bits of mercury, but nothing in great volume, which leads me to think that, like Andrew demonstrated for us, much of the trade is actually being done outside of the realm of apothecary and medicinal, strictly medicinal trading. So I'm looking at records for pharmacies and hospitals and infirmaries, and I'm seeing small amounts of mercury, but not any grand scale of trade. However, it's important to note that and here's a nice image from a Japanese screen, which I'll pass around. And it shows Portuguese traders coming into Japan with their Asian and African servants, and they're unloading all kinds of goods. Medicine was a key trade product for the Portuguese all over Asia. It's one of the fundamental things that they trade. We talk about spices, and that you have probably the apocryphal story of the Portuguese showing up for the first time in India, and the Muslim traders who are there saying, "Why are you here?" And the answer is supposed to have been from Vasco da Gama, "We're here for God and spices." Right? We're seeking Christians and spices. Well, those spices were also medicines, and so the concept of a droga, a drug, incorporates not only what we would think of as culinary spices, but also those spices did double duty as medicine, and mercury is caught up into that. So it's a fundamental part of the stuff that the Portuguese are trading all over the East. Again, a Japanese screen that shows one of the black ships coming into Japan in the 16th century. We also tend to forget just how global and widespread the Portuguese trading networks were in the 16th and 17th and 18th centuries. It literally went all the way from the entire coast of Brazil, much of West Africa, and throughout all of the major trading ports of Asia. And so the capacity to move stuff like mercury was there. It would have filled out and rounded out the cargoes of ships as just another product that you could make a profit on if you had room in your ship. Mercury is relatively low bulk. It's heavy, but it's valuable. And so you can tuck those bags or flasks of mercury into any extra space that you have and make a profit on it. And so I think a lot of it probably moved even without being formally registered. And so this is why we don't have records for it. The other thing to keep in mind is that when we think about the major sources of mercury, and it's those two mines that we've been talking about, Almedine and Huancavelica. This is a really bad image of an 18th century Portuguese ship. We'll just leave that behind. No big deal. But when we think about the sources, we have the Almedine mine here, which is only about 100 kilometers from the border with Portugal. And Seville and Lisbon had very tight and frequent coastwise trade links. So mercury could very easily have been carried from Lisbon, or from Seville to Lisbon. And then the Peru mine, where another 100,000 tons of mercury are being produced in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, is all tied in to trade that the Portuguese would have had access to, particularly when the two crowns are united between 1580 and 1640. During the time of Philip II of Spain, the Portuguese crown is subsumed into the Spanish crown, and this opens up opportunities even more so for trade between the two empires, right? So this combined empires for 60 years allowed some opportunities that would have allowed the flow of Mercury to the east. So much of this is speculative, what I'm opening with. I don't have the records that can prove the large-scale movement of Mercury, but what I can tell you is that by the 17th and 18th century, it's used in all of the Jesuit pharmacies in Asia that I'm aware of, and that would include places like Malacca, Goa, Diu, Daman, Macau. You have mercury as a standard medicinal substance, and the records that you're aware of that would speak about large-scale imports of mercury into South Asia, I'd like to look at those in greater detail so that I can try to trace this.
I think the source that I had this from, this note, I followed it up, and I think it's simply a mistake. I think it's actually about things that happened maybe 300-400 years later. We can talk
So,
about
okay, very good. None of that doesn't really undercut my argument, though, that I think that this could have happened. There's a very good book that's come out, and again, this is by analogy, but a good book that came out about 2 years ago about the movement of emeralds from the sources in Colombia to the Middle East and South Asia. And the emeralds are being moved also by Portuguese merchants, even though they're mined in an area that's controlled by the Spanish. They go through trade channels into Portuguese hands, and it's the Portuguese that actually end up distributing them to places like the Mughal Empire, Persia, and so on. Anyway, so mercury is analogous to that. Okay, what I really want to talk to you about, though, today, and what I want to spend my main time talking about, are a couple of obscure records from the second half of the 18th century. And in responding to Dagmar's request about records for mercury, I wanted to look at original primary source documents or early published documents to see how mercury is actually used in Portuguese medicine of the 18th and 17th century. So there are two very good documents that I've been able to draw on. One is a published source. This is published in Lisbon in 1799 by a physician, José Pinto de Azevedo. And he's an interesting character. He's born in Rio de Janeiro. He's the son of a wealthy merchant in Brazil. He goes to Lisbon for his early education, and then he gets his medical training in Leiden and in Edinburgh, Scotland. He then comes back to Portugal and is posted to Angola for almost 10 years at the end of the 18th century. And this is exactly at the time when Angola is ground zero, the absolute center point of the transatlantic slave trade. More slaves are being shipped out of Angola than any other place out of Luanda, and they're going mainly to Rio de Janeiro and Salvador de Bahia, Brazil. And we're talking about 10 to 20,000 people a year being shipped out of this one port. What he's dealing with as the chief physician of Angola is mainly fevers, but also lots of dysentery, the kinds of things that you would use, dysentery and skin problems that you would use mercury for. So he has a number of different recipes for dealing with fevers, and I'll get to him. I'll deal with him at the end of my talk. The other really important document that I'm drawing from today is this one. This looks like it's printed. It's actually all manuscript. Someone very carefully drew this. And what this says is a collection of various recipes and specific secrets of the principal apothecaries of our company, the Jesuits, in Portugal, India, Macau, and Brazil. And these are composed and experimented with by the best doctors and apothecaries, the most celebrated ones in all of these parts. And it also it includes a lot of commentary about how they found their materials, how they mixed them, how they applied them, and what they did, what they were supposed to do. So this is a real gold mine. It's written down, it's a compilation made in 1766, and it's the result of the Jesuits having been expelled from all Portuguese territories in 1759 and 1760. So when the Jesuits are driven out, they sort of regroup in Rome, and one enterprising scribe got together all of the best apothecaries of the Jesuits from all over the Jesuit missions globally in the Portuguese world, and they said, right, we have to guard this information because it's strategic knowledge about healing. They're secret recipes, and the next page opens with an admonition to the reader that says, look, you're a loyal member of our brotherhood. Don't tell people about this, because this is worth money. They're very explicit about it in the introduction of the book. And so we have this magnificent 600-something page manuscript that's just chock full of different recipes. And I want to take you through a number of those, about 10 of them today. So this is what the book looks like. On page number 573, we have an explication of the various characters of the chemical arts. And so you can go through and you can learn how apothecaries noted all of the various types. And here's a detail of the various mercury. So we've got precipitated mercury, mercury of Saturn, sublimated mercury, and live mercury. And the notation is very similar to the one that I showed you earlier. These are other types of mercury compounds, which include argent vivo, which is here, and it's got the little mercury symbol. Then azog, which is another word for mercury in Portuguese, same symbol. And cinabrio, or cinnabar, which is here, and it has a different symbol. I apologize to you in the back who probably can't see that very well. But the symbol is slightly different because it's still in stone form. It's not metallic, so it's noted in a different way. Oops. We also have an index of internal remedies, along with the simples and how they're composed. So this is the main. This is the index that tells you look up something that you want to use, and it tells you what recipes include that type of medicine. So under INM, we've got various mercury recipes and where they come from. But we had to also look under azog and cinabrio and the various other ones in order to collect. And what I came up with was about 20 different recipes from this book alone. The book has over 200 recipes. So a good 10% of them have mercury in them. We also have other kinds of products. These are seasoned waters, aguas temporadas, which include their decoctions. And so we have a mercury water, mercurial, agua de mercurial, which is there. And that's a decoction of mercury. So these are what, this is what the main part of the book looks like. This is on page 218, 219. And it's how you make sweet sublimated mercury. Mercurio sublimado dos. And this is sort of the basic substance. It's basically how do you sublimate mercury? How do you extract it? Okay? And it tells you what you're going to need, the 2 ingredients here, and then it gives you instructions, pretty detailed instructions on how to do it. And eventually, at the end, it'll say virtues, and that's what this is used for. Okay? So this is another one. And here I'm going to give you some details because I've transcribed and translated some of these for you. So this is Mercurio alkalicistas, which I think is an alkaline mercury. It includes azog. This is olhos of caranguejo, which are crab's eyes. What you want is a red pigment. And you can either use that or prepared coral. So they want that nice red pigment somehow to mix with the mercury. What this is supposed to do for you, it says later as virtues, it says it is a great alterative meaning something that will gradually restore healthy bodily functions, and then it gives the dose and usage. The way to make this, it says, is to grind all the ingredients together in a stone mortar until the mercury cannot be seen. And then they were aware of the fact that it would eventually evaporate off if you kept it at room temperature, so they admonish you to keep it in a glass jar, very well stoppered, so that the mercury can't leak out. This is a mercurial panacea, Panacea Mercurial. And again, this is all hand done. Incredible manuscript. Did I tell you, by the way, this is at the Jesuit archive in Rome, the Archivo of the Society of Jesus in Rome. And it isn't available online. I was encouraging them when I was there last summer to try to put it up on the web, but they don't do that very much. But they will, they'll be happy to sell you a disc with all of the slides on it, so you can get your very own if you'd like. What's interesting about many of these recipes is that it tells you the remedy, and it also tells you where it was first composed, or where it comes from when it was written down. And so in this case, it comes from the pharmacy of the college, the Jesuit college in Bahia, Brazil. Okay? And it also then often shows that it mixes mercury with substances that are either from Brazil or from other places within the Portuguese Empire. For my purposes, the reason I first went to look at this document was it encapsulates and sort of demonstrates the blending and, if you will, hybridization that happens within the Portuguese Empire of mixing both indigenous medicines with medicines from other locations and other cultures and other medical traditions. And you see that demonstrated here by the mixing of different types of medicines, often from completely different sides of the planet. You'll have medicines that originate in China being mixed with medicines from the Amazon. And they're recorded in these medical recipes in the mid-18th century. So this has calomel, sublimated calomel, and it's calomel that's been sublimated 12 times. So it's highly purified calomel. And it also has spirit of wine. Its virtues, if it's taken internally, this panacea serves for all types of Gallic, that is French or venereal disease, obstructions of the bowels, scorbutic ills, scurvy, intestinal worms, and if you use it externally, it's for scrofula, herpes, and any excoriation of the skin. It mixes flour of sulfur and just common, I presume, olive oil to make a liniment with which to anoint the wrists, the armpits, and the back of the knees for 3 days. You use it at night, and the liniment is also good for eczema. So here I'm just transcribing and translating exactly what they say this is good for. These are called pills for the family pills. And they're from the pharmacy of the College of St. Anthony, which was in Lisbon, São Antão. And here you have a very long list of ingredients which come from different places within the Portuguese Empire. So the ingredients are aloe of Socotra, jalapa, which was a plant from Brazil, the resin of jalapa, extract of colocynth, which is bitter apple, scammony, Benedictine extract, gutagamba, which was a kind of gum resin, vitriolic tartar, which is potassium sulfate, extract of saffron, castor oil, Indian cloves, flower of nutmeg, which is mace, and then you have this calomel, which is called calomel turquescus, which can only mean Turkish calomel. I'm not sure exactly what that means. And syrup of cucumbers of St. Gregory, whatever that is. What are these pills used for? Well, first of all, you have to cook them over a mild fire over a period of several days, and then you form them into pills, quote, of common size, so I imagine a bolus that could be easily swallowed. And what they're good for is taken, ground up and taken as drops. This serves for all types of scurvy, for French disease, hydropsy, for any type of obstructions, take them at night before lying down, or in the morning before breakfast, or at any hour of the day or night, 3 hours before eating. So there's a method, there's a system, and there's a sense that this needs to be taken when your stomach is empty and when you are not otherwise working your stomach. There's a bit of a close-up of. Now, what I haven't done, and I apologize for this, it does give the amounts, and because the part of the book I wasn't able to access that tells me exactly what these symbols mean, and probably some of you know. But what I intend to do next with this project is to figure out the exact amounts that are being recommended for use. So these are pills to dry gonorrhea. Pílulas para dessecar gonorreias. And this is from the pharmacist Manuel de Carvalho, who was, I imagine, in Lisbon. His ingredients are powdered pine resin, calomel, powdered gum of something called holy wood, which was from Brazil, Palo Santo, Peruvian balsam, and syrup of althea, which is a marshmallow plant.
The Palo Santo have been Goyak.
It could have been, yeah. I mean, there are different, it's an imprecise term, so there are different places where this could have come from, but yeah, it could well have been Goyak as well. These are mercurial pills, and again, we're using sweet mercury, mercurio dos, potato resin, powdered potato resin, and something called agua comica. Don't know what that is. Funny water. Actually, no, I'm misreading it. It says agua común, common water. So its virtues are, these pills are given with happy success to purge venereal infirmities, for obstructions, for melancholy, and all other infirmities that stem from unbalanced humors. They are potent, it tells you. So, you know, just you have page after page of these wonderful remedies and the instructions of how to compose them and what they're used for. This says powders against lombrigas, which are intestinal worms, and this comes from the pharmacy at the College of Macau in China. So the powder against stomach worms includes seeds of Alexandria, which were powdered, diaphoric mercury, which is prepared in fire, called fogo, powdered coralline, which is a kind of coral-like algae, powdered aloe resin, and powdered jalapa from Brazil. So you've got a Brazilian substance that's made its way all the way to China, being mixed in with mercury, which probably came from either Peru or Spain, and then some local substances from Macau. What are its virtues? Its virtues are, these are specific to kill intestinal worms and to expel them from the system in due course. It makes 6 doses for ingestion. It takes several days to compose and dry. And this is one of 2 Jesuit remedies for lombrigas, for the stomach intestinal worms, that contains mercury. There's another one in the book as well. This is an unguent made with azogue or mercury. It's from Bahia, Salvador de Bahia. It gives us the name of the pharmacist, the apothecary, Francisco de Silva. And this unguent of azogue contains white wax, fine turpentine, a plant called bicaúba, which is a Brazilian plant, an unguent made from bicaúba, the balsam of Brazil, which was a preparation made in the same pharmacy, live azogue, and it says it should be pure, and also lard from a male pig, banha de porco macho. So we know that it's a male pig. Its virtues are, it serves to excite the flux from the mouth with great brevity for any type of venereal disease, Gallic it calls it, old-style buboes, scabies, and skin eruptions. It treats with, treating it with all of the articulations, so it's spreading this unguent on all of the joints, spreading it broadly over some space, periodically whenever necessary. Tells you how to use it. The next one is unguent for sarna. Sarna is scabies, or a kind of a skin disease. Mange is a way to translate it. Even those sarnas which are gallica, or venereal. Includes mercurio vivo, live mercury, and also corrosive sublimated mercury, white lead, which has been washed, turpentine, olive oil, wax, and pork fat. Serves for any kind of scabies or mange. Spread it for 3 days in the morning and at night on the hands, wrists, in the armpits, and in the curves of the legs, that is behind your knees. And this is what it tells you how to do. So they all follow the same pattern. It tells you what it is, it tells you the ingredients, the amounts, how you make it, and then afterwards it gives the virtues. Very interesting document. Getting towards the end of these now, this is against lice, unguent contra pollius. And we have a rose unguent, like a rose water, rose